Greetings to you learners, my name is Chantal Oliphant and today we will be looking at a lesson on language and editing skills. So let's dig right in, all right. Remember we are looking at language features as well as comprehension strategies. Now you're going to say, well, why are we doing comprehension strategies? Remember, as much as we're covering language features, you must be able to read and understand your question that you're reading. So reading and comprehending, and therefore we included the comprehension strategies, all right. So in this lesson, we're going to be looking at language structures and our focus is going to be grammar as well as spelling and vocabulary, all right. Now, by the end of this lesson, what skills are you going to have, all right? What will you be competent in? Applying grammar rules to set questions, responding to questions based on grammar, also applying rules so that you can spell correctly, understanding and identifying aspects of spelling and vocabulary, identifying techniques to respond to questions with regard to grammar, and also analyzing and answering questions based on language structures. All right. Now, some of the keywords that you're going to encounter in the lesson, all right, that you might not be familiar with are grammar. All right. Now, grammar is a set of rules for how language is structured by the speakers and by the writers. So how we use it in our writing and in our speaking. Those are called our grammar rules. Tenses is the space of time in which an action occurs. Now, this is going to be very paramount in our lesson later. Okay. Concord is the need for grammatical agreement between the different parts of speech in a sentence. Now, in our case, we are primarily going to look at the agreement between subject and verb. So, subject and verb agreement, and then parts of speech. The term used for the categories into which words can be classified according to their function in the sentence, all right? Not as they're standing on their own, but in a sentence. Now, remember, we want to differentiate between figures of speech and parts of speech. So parts of speech is going to be how a word is classified in a sentence, but your figures of speech, those are your metaphors, similes, alliteration, personification, the colorful expressions of language. Those are figures of speech, okay? So you need to know the difference. Now, what are the common critical errors we encounter? Learners find it difficult to apply grammar rules to questions. They lack the skill to identify the grammar rule required for a particular question, and they lack the correct vocabulary to respond to questions pertaining to language structures. Learners struggle to interpret the scope of what that language question requires, and they also need to have continued practice in language activities. All right. So, you should be able to apply your rules for grammar, all right, especially in writing, comment on the effectiveness of punctuation, and then respond to questions about language structures. So in grade 12, we are looking at identifying, analyzing, and evaluating those grammar rules, and we want you to practice, practice, practice based on your questions for grammar, punctuation, and vocabulary. Remember your competencies that you need for the exam: critical thinking skills, grammar rules, rules for punctuation, vocabulary to respond to those questions, and also your reading skills. Very important when you are sitting for an exam. Learners, this brings us to an ad break. I will see you shortly. Learners, welcome back from the ad break. We will now be digging right into our language structures, and our focus is going to be on grammar. So, learners are unable to identify the different grammar rules, and because of that, it's very difficult to respond to your question. So, what are we going to be looking at? Verb tenses. reported speech, all right? I know this one's always a killer. And then parts of speech and passive voice. So we're going to be looking at those 4 aspects. So without wasting any time, let's see. Verb tenses. So an action takes place in a space of time, and that space of time is called a tense. There are 3 basic tenses, all right? But remember, we also have the continuous as well as the perfect tense. So let's just break down our 3 basic tenses. So I want you to see that with the now, we have a little nice sparkly star there, but you can either move back in time or you can move forward in time. So when we're moving forward in time, that becomes the future tense. When we're moving backward in time, that becomes the past tense. And right now is the present tense. So see how I've identified it as in today. Then when we're moving back, it is yesterday. And when we move forward, it is tomorrow. Now look at our example. I walk, that's today. When I already walked yesterday, then can you see we added an ed, and then in the future, I will walk. So there's your indicators already of how your tenses are going to work. All right, so remember, we add ed for the past, all right? And your continuous tense, I showed you there, is also called your progressive tense, all right? Now take note, when you have the present continuous tense, I want to go to this bullet here. Can you see that when you have the continuous tense, all right, the continuous tense will always be indicated by the ing at the end of the word. So start planting that as a little seed in your brain. When you see ing, it's the continuous tense. Now you must determine whether it's present continuous or past continuous. So let's look at the indicators. It is either is or are. Now this is singular and that one's plural. So I'm going to write an S and a P, all right, for singular and plural. So when it's singular, we say is walking, is cooking, but past are. Or, for plural, it's going to be are. Then with the past continuous, for the singular, it is was, but were for the plural. Okay. Now, I want you to take note, grade 12s, they will ask you the different tenses, all right? So I want you to see how your past tense, see how it adds the ed, all right? How the continuous tense has the ing ending, all right? How the perfect tense has had or have, all right? A clear indicator for the perfect tense, and then remember for your perfect continuous tense, it's have been, and there's your ing, and had been, and there's the ing for the continuous tense. The future will always have the will, all right? So make sure that you understand the tenses as they are broken down, because remember, you must just be able to respond to a question if they say, write it in this tense, which takes us to our example. She buys the milk at the grocery store in the past tense. Now, what must you do? You first circle the word, your verb in the sentence. And remember, you're going to apply your space of time. It is past tense, so buys goes to bought. All right, this is those irregular verbs where the root form of the word is going to change in the past tense, and we don't simply add ed. Okay. Now, those sharks swim in the tank, the present continuous tense. Now, remember what we said with the continuous tense? We need an ing ending to the verb. So let's look at it. So the sharks, can you see those sharks? All right. So we're going to write the word plural there. So because it's plural, it cannot be is swimming. And therefore, in our response, we see the are swimming. Carmel reads her book at night. For the past perfect tense, remember there's our had to indicate that it is in the perfect tense. So you need to apply your rules, grade 12s. When we move on, the school hosted an open day in the past continuous tense. Let's see our response. Was hosting. Remember, the school is singular, so we need was. For the continuous tense, we need the ing ending, which is indicated there. All right? Our next sentence. Cora plays her violin at the recital in the future perfect tense. Now remember, perfect, had or have. Future, will. So let's see. in our response. Will have played. Perfectly answered for you. All right. Tsepo leaves for Durban on Monday in the past tense. All right. Identify your verb, leaves, and our response shows Tsepo left. Now there's your irregular verb again. It doesn't get the ed ending. The root form of the word is going to change. All right. So that looks at our verb tenses. Now we're moving on to reported speech. Now, remember that your reported speech can also be called the indirect speech, and it paraphrases spoken words. So what we say, all right, is paraphrased without using quotes and often changing the tense as well as the pronouns. All right, so let's look at hints for changing. Number one, your punctuation must be omitted except for the capital letters and the full stop. So remember, our capital letters start sentences and our full stops end sentences. So they need to be there. Be aware of your pronouns because it's going to change, guys. All right? Verbs and modals become more past. So it backshifts in time. All right? And examples of modals: can, should, and must. All right? I know you're going to be struggling with that one, but there we've identified for you what modals are. Now, time and place is also going to change. Now look at all of these changes, and I know it looks like a truckload, but once you start practicing with your indirect and direct speech, it becomes easier, all right? So these are your possible changes, all right, that you are going to encounter when you must change your time and place. When we move on, all right, I want to identify 6 easy steps that you can follow. So let's dig right in. Underline the verb in your sentence. Circle the pronoun. Does it have to change? All right, you need to determine that. Circle words indicating time or place. Remember in our previous slide, we showed you all of those changes that could possibly occur for time and place. Then rewrite the sentence and add that. Okay, it's going to be an indicator that we're paraphrasing someone else's words. Then the verb needs to backshift in time. So we do a backtrack of the verb. Okay, then also pay attention to time words because they also change when we are changing to reported speech, or also known as indirect speech. So let's look at this example. I'm usually very shy when speaking to strange people. So we're going to put into practice those 6 steps and we're going to rewrite our sentence. So let's see. I'm circling the pronoun, I circled the verb, and I'm showing you I need to remove the quotation marks. My verb is in the present continuous tense, so remember I have to have it in the present, in the continuous tense as well when I'm changing to the reported speech, okay? And remember I have to use that. So here's my response. He said that. Can you see? All right. He was usually very shy when speaking to strange people. Now look at my verb. Look at the change that happened, all right? He's usually very shy when speaking. So my continuous tense is maintained there. You can see the ing ending for the verb. And I removed the quotation marks. Can you see? There are no quotation marks when I do reported speech, all right? However, I want you to indicate that I still have my full stop and I still have the capital letter, which I'm just going to indicate there so that you can see why I put that arrow there. It's to indicate the capital letter. All right, let's move on to our sentences and see if we can apply those rules. We will accompany you tomorrow. In my response, they said, look at the pronoun change for we to they. All right, said that. There's my little that. The magic little word for reported speech, that they would accompany us the following day. Look at my tomorrow is a time word. It became the following day. So you need to take note of that, all right? A young boy was expecting a huge reward for his effort. I want you to take note how a young boy is expecting, all right? Look at the backshift of the verb to was expecting a huge reward for his effort, all right? I want to also take note, there's my full stop and my capital letter for my sentence has remained, all right? Dean said that the treasure had been recovered from the sea a few weeks before. Now take note, learners, all right? My verb is was recovered. Now we're back shifting in time. Had been recovered. And then there's a time words there. A few weeks ago became a few weeks before. So the shift in time, all right? Your time word needs to change when you are doing reported speech. Okay, learners, we're now going to be moving on to parts of speech, all right? Now remember, these are the categories that words are divided in according to the role that they play in sentences. These are normally your building blocks of grammar, and remember, these are not figures of speech. So they're not your alliteration, similes, metaphors. They are nouns, adjectives, pronouns, adverbs. Okay, so let's look at our different parts of speech. Nouns are naming words, all right, and they are the different examples, your proper noun, common, abstract, or collective noun, all right, naming words. Pronouns replaces the name of a person, place, object, or idea. And look at your examples that are listed there. Normally the he and him. Remember, your I is your personal pronoun. That's one you always need in when you're studying your literature. Verbs are action words. Running, sitting, see, read, disagree. And remember, it can identify a state of being like is or are or am, have, had. All right? Your articles normally comes before a noun. When it's general, we use a and an. And when it's specific, we use the. And remember, a and is for your words that start with vowel sounds, a, e, I, o, u, all right? Then you use a and an for those, before those nouns, okay? Then, remember, adjectives are describing words. Now, many times learners are confused by what can be described. So, it does describe size, shape, texture, color, appearance. Not only color or appearance, texture and shape and size as well, all right? Remember those. Your adverbs are used to describe an adjective or another adverb like how, when, where, how often, or place, all right? And then prepositions, it's the position of, this is all the words, all right? These are the words that show you the position of one object in relation to another, like in, on, around, beside, next to, all right? And your conjunctions, joining words, all right? Now remember, your conjunctions are very vital in making sense in a sentence, because if you have a linking of ideas, then you have and, because, as well as. But when we change the train of thought or change the idea, then we use although, but, however, okay? So be careful with your use of conjunctions, all right? So let's look at the parts of speech in this sentence. The wispy clouds blew across the sky so peacefully today, all right? Now, we've identified, so each word in the sentence has a role to play, all right? And remember how we told you, you have to know what your definition for your part of speech is so that you can see how vital it is in your sentence, all right? So, let's apply those rules to the following sentences. The captain made a shocking announcement to his crew to abandon ship, all right? So identify the given part. So let's see. The noun in this case, can you see it can be captain, crew, announcement, or ship, all right? Now, normally we would think announcement is a verb, but in this case is making a shocking announcement, all right? So it's something that is named, okay? Your adjective, remember your hint, your adjective normally appears behind your noun. So in most cases, look behind your noun, you'll find an adjective there, all right? So let's test the rule. There's my noun, look behind my noun. What did I find? All right? In this case, we are not so lucky, all right? In this case, our noun is there, but to abandon is linked, all right? So that there will be a verb, okay? See how you must pay attention? Right, let's move on. Unfortunately, the taxi fares to town are becoming expensive. In our response, noun will be fares and town, all right? There and there. adverb is going to be expensive, and unfortunately, your preposition is going to be to, all right? Those little words that show you position of one object in relation to another, and the verb is are becoming, all right? There's our modal and our ing ending for the continuous tense, all right? So that, learners, showed you how to find parts of speech in sentences, all right? So this is where we're going to take a little pause, and I will see you after the break. All those English superheroes, welcome back from your ad break. We will now be looking at passive voice under our little grammar exercise still. Learners are unable to write sentences in the passive voice correctly. Learners are unable to identify words spelled incorrectly in a text, and learners are unable to respond to questions related to spelling and vocabulary. Now, when you're unable to do all of that, it's going to be a challenge because you're going to be losing marks in the examination. So please, learners, we are appealing to you. You'll have to practice those spelling rules and the grammar skills. So let's dig into passive voice, right? What is passive voice? It's writing a sentence in a style where the subject becomes the object. Now remember, we have to include that little word by, all right, to write a sentence in the passive voice. So let's look at the hints for changing sentences into passive voice. Number one, first underline your verb, right? Then keep the tense of the verb. So don't change the tense of the verb when you are rewriting your sentence. Find the subject as well as the object, because remember, we want to swap them around. We want the subject, all right, to become, the object to become the central part of our sentence. Start the sentence with the object then. Use the past participle of the verb. So don't lose your feathers yet. We are going to show you exactly how to do that. Add the correct form of the verb to be. All right. So once we've now identified our little hints, see if we can apply our hints. And then, oh, I omitted this one. End with by, all right? We already showed you that in the start of the slide. So remember, once we have our hints, we're going to apply our hints to our sentence now. So, in the present continuous tense, the striker is scoring a goal, all right? Now we're changing it. The goal is being scored by the striker. I want you to take note. Can you see you have an ing ending there? Now, see how the ing ending is being maintained when we're changing it into the passive voice, all right? The goal, remember, that was our object. It's now the subject of the sentence, all right? Observe how we keep the tense of the verb constant, and this is of paramount importance. Let's look at our next example. In the past tense, the striker scored a goal. Remember the ed ending? A goal was scored by the striker, keeping our verb constant. The past tense, perfect tense, excuse me, the striker has scored a goal. Then our tense is maintained, has been scored, all right? So learners, can you see that it's not so difficult? Once you start remembering your little rules and the little hints that you need to apply, it becomes like mathematics. 1 + 1 is 2. So when I apply my rules to change it, we can see the result or in our response, all right? The simple future tense, the striker will score. There's our will to indicate the future. A goal will be scored by the striker, all right? So when we're changing to the passive voice, I want to remind you to keep your verb constant, all right? Now, let's see if we can apply it to sentences of our own. So let's read. Money provides financial freedom. In our response, financial freedom is provided by money, all right? Robert is training someone every week. Every week, someone is being trained by Robert. Take note, your ing ending is included in my passive voice. Sentence number 3, the child had developed an illness causing paralysis. An illness causing paralysis had been developed See how constant my verb stays in my passive voice. All right. Now, when we move on, we're going to look at spelling and vocabulary rules now for this segment of the lesson. And let's look at some basic rules. All right. Remember, when we have a short vowel, what must happen to our short vowel? We repeat the consonant after our short vowel. Remember, with a long vowel, all right, hope, as in the magic E that affects the O, so it's hoping. So if it was a double P, can you see that it would be hopping? But because it's a long vowel, all right, we are only using a single consonant. Usually a word that can stand on its own gets a suffix able, as in adaptable, all right. However, usually a word that cannot stand on its own gets a suffix ible, as in eat becomes edible, all right. When you add all right, wow or skill and full, the word loses, the word will lose one L, all right. One L will fall away when we add it to the end of the word. The letter Q is always followed by a U when we are spelling words. Now that little rule you learned since you were in grade 1. So let's see if we can apply these rules. When a word ends on the letter Y, you have to change the Y to an I before we add any other suffix to the word. When a word ends on the letters IE, it becomes, all right, a Y before you add the ing, like die for dying, all right. And remember, it's always I before E, except after C. So we say believe, but then with receive, we change the order, all right. So let's see. When words end on age, the E remains like manage in manageable and love for lovable. And then words that end on C get the letter K added before we adding ing or ed to the word. So look at picnic for picnicking or panic for panicked. All right. Learners, let's see if we can apply those spelling rules to the following sentences. Right. If you are training someone, it is useful to know how his mind works. Now, please take note, what did we say about the double L? All right. So in our response, we see the word useful needs to lose the one L. Have you received the gift she bought for you? Remember what we said about the I and the E after C. All right. So we can see the correction there for received. All right. Candace was hoping she could pass her driver's license. And in our response, we see because it is coming from the word hoping, we should, because it's a long sound, we only have to have one consonant. All right. Let's see if we can do these sentences as well. The teacher lost her patience with her unruly class. So if you look at the word patience, all right, these are the ones that are sitting in the queues at the hospital or at the clinic, all right. In our response, we see the patience is the virtue that we need to have and not those people sitting in the long queues. I ordered, all right, a cup of coffee. This is tea, he said. So if you look at the word ordered, all right, that is ordered. So let's see if we can get the correct spelling. And there we go, ordered. All right, we add the ed at the end of the word order to show that it is in the past tense. All the political parties had campaign rallies this week, all right? Now look at the word parties. What's the rule? We need to change that Y into an I, and then we add ES to make the word plural. So there you have it. You applied spelling rules to these sentences. Now let's look at a passage where we have to find the spelling errors. It is believed that the eyes of a shark are different in size and shape. The ones with the largest eyes are adaptable to live in deeper waters. The sharks with the largest eyes need even less light and are therefore found at greater depths. Everyone will always be hoping never to meet a shark. The skillful surfers are best at avoiding these creatures without a question. Many a swimmer replies negatively when asked about shark encounters and whether they panicked now. I'm sure you must have identified a few of them. So let's see what happens in our response. There we have it. It is believed. Remember, the I before the E rule, except after C, all right? Look at my single vowel sound. I need another consonant there. Look at the word adaptable. This word, all right, can it stand on its own? All right. If it can, that means we can't use the I, we need to use the A, all right? Look at my spelling for need. It's the double E sound. Skillful, remember in skillful, we only need the one L, the other one needs to fall away, otherwise our word is going to be loaded. Look at these, all right? And question, remember your rule there, we need the U after the Q, okay? Whether, remember this is our silent letters, needs to fall in there, and the word panic needs the word K to follow afterwards. So there we have the corrections, all right? Believed and different, there we've got the double F. Adaptable, the need, all right? Skillful, we drop the second L, otherwise the word is too loaded. And then the Q for requiring the U as well as asked, all right? There's the E missing in the text. And then panicked, your rule, you need a K after the C, all right? Learners, that brings us to an ad break. I will see you shortly. Learners, let me welcome you back from the ad break. We're going to dig into our next set of questions. So I'm going to read this little passage to you because it's going to be useful for answering the questions, all right? His truth, his story in his words. The Springbok captain, Siya Kolisi, have mentioned his tough upbringing in his newly released autobiography. In his book, Rise, Kolisi details his successes on rugby and life. He describes his tough upbringing in Zwedi Township near Gqeberha, Port Elizabeth. It's really an inspiring book. At the age of 12, Kolisi impressed the scouts at a youth tournament in Mossel Bay. He was offered a scholarship to study at Grey Junior College in Gqeberha. He subsequently received a rugby scholarship from the prestigious Grey High School. Kolisi was a regular player in the Grey High School first rugby team. He was also a player in the Eastern Province youth team between 2007 and 2009. He played in the Under-16 Grant Kuma Week and the Under-18 Craven Week while still at school. When he finished school, he joined the Western Province rugby team. The book was named after my mother, said Kolisi. Her name, is Pakama, which in isiXhosa means rise. All right, so you've read the passage, and this is how you read your passage in the exam, all right? But as you're reading, I want you to make sure that you pick up on the errors that you can, that are quite obvious to you, all right? So let's move into our questions quickly. Correct the single error in these sentences, and they're asking you to write only the word. Now, when they say the single error, this means there's only going to be one error, and they're asking you to write only the word, all right? So don't give us a sentence that is rewritten. Just do what the instruction tells you to do. So it's really an inspiring book, all right? So in our first sentence, we are looking for the error, which is identified as its. Now remember, this one is not appropriate for the sentence because its means it is, the contraction of the word, and not the word used in that form. So in that case, we are missing the apostrophe, which is indicated in our response there, all right? In our next sentence, he was offered a scholarship to study at Grey Junior School in Gqeberha, all right? So in this case, we see there's a short vowel sound, but we only have one consonant after the short vowel sound. So let's see what our response shows us. We need the double F in order for us to follow up on the single vowel sound. All right, let's move on to our next question. Rewrite the following sentence in the simple past tense. Now, please take note, simple past tense. All right, now from your knowledge, you should know that when you have the past tense, you are going to add either ed to the verb, all right, so we're going to say plus ed like that, or if it's an irregular verb, then the root form is going to change, like eat will become ate, run will become ran. So let's go. He describes his tough upbringing in Zwide Township near Gqeberha. So let's see what our response identifies for us. He described, all right, so can you see the word describe? So that is in simple present, now becomes described in simple past tense. Okay, remember you are going to apply your tense rules for the verb tenses there. In 1.3, rewrite the following sentence in the passive voice. Now, there we go. Don't be throwing the babies out with the bathwater. All right, it is easy to do if you know how to apply your rules. Now, remember, the first thing you remember is to change the subject and the object. You need to have the word by, and also you want to keep the verb tense constant. All right. So, Khulisi impressed the scouts at the youth tournament in Mossel Bay. Now, in our response, we see our object of the sentence is moved, right? So the scouts, there we go, the object of our sentence, at the youth tournament in Mossel Bay were impressed, all right? Okay, can you see how my verb remains constant, but we're just making it more past, back shifting in time. And then there is my subject. It becomes my object in the sentence now, all right? So in this case, it's the subject, but in this case, when we're changing it, it becomes the object of the sentence, all right? Okay, let me just erase that and write it much neater, because otherwise you are not going to be able to figure that one out, hey? There we go, all right? And then look at my verb. The impressed becomes more past, all right, by making it were impressed. And then the scouts, there we go, was my object in this, but in my passive voice, it became the subject, all right. So there's my rules for changing a sentence into the passive voice. So remember, don't sweat it, know your rules and apply the rules to the sentences, all right. In 1.4, study the following sentence, all right. He was also a player in the Eastern Province youth team between 2007 and 2009. So you need to name the part of speech of the underlined words. Now, you don't have to give me the part of speech for the entire sentence, only for the underlined words, okay? Now, I want you to take note and remember this. Part of speech, all right, is the qualification of the word as it is used in the sentence, all right? So in this case, we are not looking for figures of speech. It's not your noun. Figures of speech as in metaphors, similes, assonance, hyperbole, not those. We're looking for the part of speech, okay? What role does this word play in the sentence? So in this case, we're looking for the underlined words only, and we identified it as your team, underlined there, is a noun, and conjunction, underlined there, is for and, all right? A joining word and a naming word, all right? I'm sure that one was easy to deal with. Now, rewrite the following sentence, and we're doing another one. The book in reported speech, all right? We're doing reported speech this time. And remember your rules for reported speech, all right? Remove your inverted commas. That's the first thing you do, all right? Remember that you're going to have the word that, okay? And we are going to make sure that when we are looking at our verbs, looking at our pronouns, we're going to see if they need to be changed as well. So in our response, Khulisi said that, all right? There's our indicator. The book had been named. So look at was named. Can you see that is past tense? Now we want to go back shifting in time. So to back shift, we make it the perfect tense, had been named after his mother. And see how we maintain the full stop and we also maintained the capital letter to start the sentence. So as much as we're saying remove the quotation marks, all right, we maintain the capital letter for the start of the sentence, and we maintain the full stop to end the sentence, all right. And remember your little magic word, that, okay. In our next question, give the correct degree of comparison in the following sentence. All right, so degree of comparison, remember your positive, comparative, superlative, and when we are doing the comparative, we add ER to the word. When we are doing the superlative, we add EST to the word, all right? So that's the most intense form when we get to the superlative. So coffee is generally expensive than tea. So let's see what our response identifies: more expensive, all right? Now, can you see that we only have two things that we're comparing, not three, and therefore we have more, the comparative for the degrees, all right, that we had to identify. Okay, so in your response, you're going to have to use more expensive and not most expensive. Okay, learners, that brings us to an ad break. I will see you just after the ad break. Learners, welcome back from your ad break. Let's wrap up our session. Okay, so what have we focused on in this little segment? We looked at our language features and we looked at comprehension strategies. Now remember, the reason why we included the comprehension strategies is because you had to read the question or read the text that's going to appear in your question paper, and then understand that or add meaning to that before you can attempt the questions, and therefore we included the comprehension strategies there. What did we focus on in this lesson? Now remember, we looked at grammar, so those rules, all right, those structured rules that we apply to sentences, and we looked at spelling and vocabulary, the rules that we apply when we are changing from singular to plural, all right, or when we want to make the reported speech and look at figures of speech, parts of speech, sorry. Then our keywords that we applied, that was useful in our lesson. It was the definition for grammar, all right, the definition for tenses, okay. Now remember, when you are looking at grammar, it is those structured set of rules, all right, that you apply when either you are speaking or you are writing. So it becomes very important to apply grammar rules to writing so that your writing is accurate and easy to read, okay? Tenses are spaces of time. So remember, we had our three basic tenses, but then we also had the continuous tense as well as the perfect tense, all right? Concord was the agreement between the parts of a sentence. For us, primarily, it was the agreement between subject and verb. Remember, we looked at our pronouns as well, so it is important that all of those parts of the sentence are in agreement, all right? And remember, parts of speech are the categories into which words are divided or classified when we use them in a sentence, all right? So you have to read the sentence and then apply which part of speech, or identify which part of speech that word is in that particular sentence, all right? And we differentiate between parts of speech and figures of speech, where figures of speech were your assonance, simile, and metaphors, personification, that flowery expressions that we use, and then we distinguish between that and parts of speech. Now remember, common critical errors. Learners find it difficult to apply grammar rules to questions. They lack the skill to identify these grammar rules and apply them as the question requires. They lack the correct vocabulary to respond to questions pertaining to language structures, and also learners struggle to interpret the scope of what the language question may require of them. And then learners do not have practice when they have to do language activities. So we are encouraging you to practice, practice, practice so that you hone that skill for your grammar rules, okay? What do I need when I am sitting in the exam room? Critical thinking skills becomes vital because you're reading, you're comprehending, and now you need to interpret what you read in order to answer questions. Time management, paramount importance. You need to stick within the limited time for that question paper. Apply your grammar rules, apply your rules for punctuation, and then you need the correct vocabulary to respond to language questions. And please, learners, reading skills are important. You have to read carefully, focus on what that question requires so that you can earn the marks when you're responding. All right. Now, we have identified question papers that is going to be very helpful for you to practice the hints and the skills and the little advice that we shared with you in this little clip. So go through those question papers and make sure that you practice so that you can hone your skill. Learners, I want to thank you for joining me for the session. I'm hoping that what we shared with you is going to be very, very helpful, and it is going to earn you the marks that you need in your exams, all right? So I want to wish you well, and I hope that we will see each other soon.